Buy my bike, sir. Mommy hasn't eaten in 2 days. The bikers learned who took everything from her. The boy stood on the side of the road, trembling in the cold wind, his small fingers clutching the handlebars of a rusty old bicycle. His clothes were torn, his shoes mismatched, and his eyes, those big, frightened eyes, carried a sadness that no child should ever bear. The passing cars barely noticed him, but he didn't give up. Every time an engine slowed, he would step forward and whisper through cracked lips, "Buy my bike, sir, please. Mommy hasn't eaten in 2 days." If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of compassion, then please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Royal Stories. Your small gesture helps us spread more stories that remind the world humanity still exists. The sun had already begun to sink behind the city skyline, painting the clouds in hues of orange and violet, when a group of bikers came roaring down the street. They were loud, rough-looking men with tattoos and leather jackets, the kind of people most others crossed the street to avoid. But fate has its strange ways, because that evening, those very men were about to witness something that would break their hearts and change their lives. Their leader, a tall man named Blaze, noticed the boy first. He saw him wiping tears from his face, his little frame shaking as he tried to balance the old bicycle. "Pull over," Blaze told his men, his voice low but commanding. The sound of heavy engines died as they parked near the sidewalk, and all eyes turned to the child. The boy's name was Eli. He couldn't have been more than 8 years old. His cheeks were hollow from hunger, and his lips trembled as he whispered his plea again, "Please, sir, buy my bike. It's all I have left. Mommy, she's sick and hasn't eaten for 2 days." Blaze's throat tightened. He looked at the bicycle. It was small, bent at the frame, the chain rusted and squeaking. It wasn't worth more than a few dollars. But the way the boy looked at it, as if it were the last thing tying him to hope, told Blaze it wasn't just an old bike. It was a story, a memory, maybe even love in metal form. "Where's your mom, kid?" Blaze asked quietly, his usual roughness fading. Eli pointed toward a narrow alley, where dim light flickered through a broken window. Without a word, Blaze nodded to 2 of his men, and together they followed the boy. Inside a crumbling old apartment, they found her, Eli's mother, Mara. She was lying on a thin mattress on the floor, pale as paper, her breathing shallow. The place had no food, no light, not even proper blankets. Empty bottles of water and torn grocery receipts littered the floor. A broken photograph frame leaned against the wall. Inside was a smiling family, Mara, her husband, and Eli, before everything fell apart. Blaze knelt beside her and checked her pulse. She was weak but alive. He looked around and clenched his fists. Something inside him snapped. Not in anger at the woman or the child, but at the world that allowed them to suffer like this. That night, Blaze and his men took action. They carried Mara to their bikes, wrapped her in one of their jackets, and rode through the city until they reached a 24-hour clinic. While doctors tended to her, Eli sat quietly in the waiting area, gripping his small bicycle bell in his hand. Every time a nurse walked by, he would look up with eyes full of hope and fear, afraid they might tell him she was gone. Hours passed. When the doctor finally came out, he smiled gently. "She'll make it," he said. "She was dehydrated and starving, but we're giving her fluids now. She just needs rest and proper care." Eli burst into tears, his tiny body shaking as Blaze knelt beside him and placed a large, weathered hand on his shoulder. That single moment, an innocent child crying into the chest of a man the world saw as dangerous, was enough to melt the hearts of every biker in the room. But Blaze wasn't satisfied. He needed to know why this had happened. When Mara regained enough strength to speak, she told them everything. Her husband had died in an accident a year ago, leaving her with debts she never understood. Then came the landlord, who pretended to help but tricked her into signing papers that took everything away. He sold her furniture, seized her savings, and left her and Eli on the streets. When she begged for mercy, he laughed and told her to sell her pride like everyone else. That night, Blaze made a promise. "You're not alone anymore," he said. "We'll take care of this." And the bikers did exactly that. The next day, they tracked down the man, a wealthy landlord named Victor Hale, known for his cruel business tactics. They didn't use violence, but they made their presence known. They stood outside his office, dozens of roaring motorcycles shaking the ground. When Victor came out, they confronted him with Mara's signed papers, the witnesses he had manipulated, and the lawyer one of the bikers had found overnight. Under the pressure, and the fear of exposure, Victor returned what he had taken. Mara's debt was cleared, and her home was reinstated. The bikers even fixed the place up themselves, painting walls, installing lights, and filling the kitchen with food. For the first time in months, Eli woke up to the smell of warm bread instead of silence. As the days passed, Blaze and his men kept visiting. They taught Eli how to repair bikes, gave him a helmet that looked too big for his head, and told him that kindness wasn't weakness, it was strength. The old rusty bike that Eli once tried to sell became a symbol among the bikers. They cleaned it, repainted it, and engraved 3 words on its frame: "Never lose hope." Months later, Mara was working again, Eli was back in school, and the bikers had become like family. Every Sunday, Eli would ride beside them during their charity runs, his little bicycle tires rolling proudly next to massive Harley wheels. People in town would stop and stare, sometimes even cry, not because of the bikes, but because of the story behind them. In a world often blind to suffering, one boy's simple plea, "Buy my bike, sir," had awakened something powerful in those men. It reminded them that no matter how broken you are, you can still choose to be someone's miracle. And so, every time the sun set and the engines roared through the horizon, Eli would look up and whisper to his mother, "See, Mommy. They bought my bike, but they gave us back our life." If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, and share it with someone who believes in kindness, hope, and second chances. And don't forget to subscribe to Royal Stories for more real, emotional journeys like this one. Speech balloon special request. Tell us in the comments, what would you have done if you were the biker who met Eli that day?